The desert wind carried the taste of dust and secrets that no one dared to speak aloud. Dry earth cracked beneath the boots of those who walked the single street of Silver Creek, a town that had long forgotten the meaning of justice. On the porch of the saloon, men with cold eyes followed every movement, their silence heavier than the heat. Somewhere among them, the sheriff watched, a man whose badge was polished with stolen gold. At the far end of the street, a young woman stepped out of the general store, her skirts brushing against the dusty ground. Emma Carter had never fired a gun in her life, and that fact was whispered with amusement in every corner of town. But behind her soft gaze and delicate hands, something restless had begun to burn. It started with a sound, a muffled cry from the alley behind the bank. Emma turned, her heart hammering. She saw two of the sheriff's men dragging an old prospector, his face battered, his hands bound. The man's eyes locked with hers, and in a trembling voice, he managed to say one word: gold. Before she could move, the sheriff himself stepped into the light, his shadow falling over the man like a noose. He looked at Emma with a slow, knowing smile, one that promised trouble. "Best keep walking, miss. This ain't your fight." But in that moment, Emma knew it would become her fight. And when the dust finally settled in Silver Creek, no one would remember her as the maiden who didn't know how to use a gun. Silver Creek sat in the middle of nowhere, a place where the sun seemed determined to bleach the life out of every building and soul. The town had grown from gold fever, but what once was promise had turned into greed. The sheriff ruled like a king without a crown, and his law was whatever kept his pockets heavy. Emma Carter had lived here all her life. Her days were filled with tending her father's small shop, stitching torn clothes for neighbors, and helping at the small chapel on Sundays. She was respected in the way one respects a porcelain vase, admired but never expected to hold weight. Everyone knew Emma was gentle, harmless, and they liked it that way. But lately, the streets felt different. Whispers traveled faster. Fear clung to every face. The sheriff's men had grown bolder, taking from the people in daylight, laughing as they did. And now, with rumors of missing gold from the miners' last haul, tension curled through town like a rattlesnake waiting to strike. Emma hadn't planned on changing anything. She wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding people who least expected it. And when it came for her, it would force her to choose, stay the quiet shopkeeper's daughter, or become something entirely different. If you enjoy stories of the Old West filled with grit, courage, and justice served under the blazing sun, make sure to subscribe for more tales like this, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Emma didn't sleep that night, not with the prospector's broken whisper echoing in her head. "Gold," he'd said, like a prayer or a curse, and the sheriff's smile had sealed the meaning. She trimmed the lamp until the flame was a thin blue eye, afraid even light might gossip. From the back room she heard her father cough, a dry rattle like beans in a tin. He believed in keeping heads down, keeping ledgers straight, keeping peace with dangerous men. Emma believed in keeping people whole, which felt impossible where law wore a crooked badge. Dawn found her lacing her boots, as if tying knots in her own fear. Silver Creek woke in stages, roosters first, then doors, then lies. Men pushed past each other toward the bank, as if proximity bred fortune. The sheriff's office door opened on its own, like a hungry mouth, then shut with a click. Two deputies lounged under the porch rail, thumbing cartridges with lazy precision. Emma stepped onto the boardwalk, skirts light with dust, chin stubborn as a fence post. She wasn't brave, she told herself. She was merely tired of being rearranged by other people. Ahead, the alley where the prospector had fallen looked freshly swept, like guilt after rain. At the general store, she measured coffee and patience for a line of tight smiles. Mrs. Avery whispered that miners from Red Butte were missing, maybe run off, maybe worse. A boy asked for licorice and received a sermon on brushing teeth to hide his nerves. Emma wrapped flour and nails while the town wrapped itself in rehearsed normalcy. When Deputy Cole sauntered in, the room tilted, conversation slid under the counter. He grinned wide enough to show teeth he hadn't earned, and drummed knuckles on the glass. "Sheriff sends regards," he said, and laid a folded paper like a snake sheds skin. The notice claimed a temporary levy for public safety needs, stamped with official swagger. Rates doubled without warning, payments due by sundown, non-compliance invited correction. Cole watched her read the words as if tasting their bitter was entertainment. "Hard times, miss," he said, tipping a hat that covered a thieving brain. Emma signed the receipt because refusing would only write her name on the next beating, but a small fury lit in her chest, steady as an ember under ash. Cole took the coins, took a peppermint, and took the room's air when he left. After lunch, Emma carried a sack to the chapel, where the bell's tongue had grown shy. Reverend Pike met her at the door, eyes rimmed with sincerity and sleeplessness. He'd prayed over empty plates all week and blessed fewer miracles than he'd promised. "Emma," he said, soft as quilt batting, "you should stay away from the sheriff's business." She told him she was staying close to the town's business, which was being strangled. He began a verse about meek inheritors. She interrupted with bread, cheese, and a pointed smile. On the pew behind them lay a hat crushed flat, as if worn by a man who'd fallen. The prospector, bandaged and stubborn, blinked awake when Emma said his name. "Elias Finch," she tried, and his eyes fluttered like moths against a jar. He grabbed her wrist gently, urgency and apology mixed in the tremor. "Not bank, vault by the arroyo, night wagons," he rasped. Words both map and confession. Emma leaned close, catching the scent of iodine and long roads traveled too cheaply. "Who else knows?" she asked, and the church windows answered with reflected sky. "Girl," he whispered, "they'll hollow you out if you stand between them and a vein." Back at the store, Emma spread a county map under the lamplight and held it with flour tins. Silver Creek was a fist, the arroyo, a vein, the trail, a scar toward Badlands. If the sheriff was diverting ore at night, the bank's busy days were a theater. She marked likely crossings where wagon wheels would whisper but leave shy tracks. Her father shuffled in, rubbing sleep from his face like chalk off a slate. "Child," he said, weary as a worn boot heel, "we don't fix wolves by counting them." "We don't fix sheep by pretending fences are teeth," she answered, surprising them both. She borrowed a rifle that evening from Mr. Turner, who measured her with winter eyes. "It kicks," he said, "and so will the men you're thinking of." Emma shouldered the weight, surprised at how it decided her posture and reordered her breath. Turner added a box of cartridges with the finality of a prayer and a curse. "Your mother could outshoot sparrows," he muttered, as if revealing a family recipe. Emma filed the fact in a new drawer inside her, one labeled "Possible" and "Buried." She thanked him and left before either of them had to say, "Be careful." Night pressed its hand over Silver Creek until stars punctured the skin. Emma moved along back fences, the rifle hidden in a feed sack, steps memorizing darkness. At the windmill, coyotes stitched their laughter into the horizon and unwound it again. She reached the arroyo where scrub turned to ribs and shadow to intention. At first there was only the wind, smearing the desert secrets across her cheek. Then came the low murmur of men and the grunt of mules working an invisible theft. Lantern light bobbed below like will-o-wisps, guiding sin instead of travelers. She lay on her belly, smelling iron, dust, and a fear that tasted like pennies. 2 wagons sat canted near a cut bank, tarps humped with promise. The sheriff stood hatless, hair silvered by starlight, counting sacks with a banker's caress. Cole smoked and laughed, his boot heel grinding some small thing into smaller. Emma raised the rifle, not to shoot, but to borrow the sight's narrow courage. Through the aperture the world simplified, crosshairs, target, breath, future. She lowered the barrel, steadied her breathing, and studied the rhythm of their crime. When the last sack thumped into place, a third figure stepped from the dark. Reverend Pike, collar white as surrender, hands trembling like paper in rain. Emma's lungs forgot their job as he handed over a ledger wrapped in cloth. The sheriff flipped through pages and nodded, the pact between fear and appetite notarized. Pike glanced toward the ridge, toward heaven, toward anything that might absolve him. Emma swallowed shock and wrote a new truth in her bones. Virtue could be rented. The wagons creaked, the men turned, and a mule brayed like a broken trumpet. Emma slid backward, and her boot kissed a loose stone that clattered like dropped silver. Lanterns swung, voices snapped, and a bullet took a bite out of the mesquite above. She ran bent low, the rifle an awkward wing, heart drumming the town's alarm alone. Footsteps tore at the slope behind her, curses stringing the night like fence wire. At the windmill she cut left, then right, trusting childhood paths across dark yards. A dog barked, a window lit, and then the town remembered its talent for hiding. Emma slammed the store door, barred it, and leaned against the wood until it learned her shape. Dawn arrived bruised, and Emma's mirror returned a stranger with desert in her eyes. She brewed coffee that believed in survival and poured it into a cup that did not. Her father read her face and did not ask. Love can be fluent in omissions. When the sheriff's boots clicked on the boardwalk, their sound knew where to find her. He entered smiling, the kind reserved for sermons and funerals you cause yourself. "Miss Carter," he said, eyes patient as a coil. "Someone took a walk last night." Emma folded her hands and met his gaze, and the day shifted onto a different track. The sheriff's gaze lingered like a vulture's shadow, slow and deliberate. Emma kept her voice steady, a tone she'd once used to calm, skittish horses. "You sleep well, Sheriff. Don't know much about late-night walks." He tapped the brim of his hat, eyes narrowing as if weighing her words like gold dust. "Be careful," he murmured, though the words sounded more like a sentence than advice. When he left, the air felt thicker, the boards under her feet creaked with new meanings. Emma knew the game had changed. Now, they both understood she was a player. By midday, the town buzzed with news no one wanted to say aloud. 2 miners from Red Butte had been found outside town, bruised and emptied of coin. The sheriff called it a robbery, but those who knew better kept their eyes low. Emma moved between shelves and customers, pretending her mind wasn't racing. Every time the door swung open, she feared it would be coal or worse. The prospector's map scraps swirled in her head, merging with last night's images. The gold wasn't just stolen, it was being smuggled under everyone's noses. That evening, she visited Mr. Turner again, under the excuse of returning a tin. He stood in the doorway like a gate no one dared push open. "Back so soon?" he asked, suspicion and curiosity mixing in his voice. Emma told him half the truth. She'd seen wagons near the arroyo, men loading sacks. Turner's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to the road as if expecting shadows to materialize. "Careful who you tell," he said. "Truth's got a price in this town." Still, he slid a box of extra cartridges across the counter, payment for her silence. The next night, Emma's plan took shape in the quiet hours after supper. She would follow the wagons, not just watch. She needed proof. Her hands trembled as she loaded the rifle, each cartridge clicking like a locked door. Outside, the moon climbed, spilling silver over rooftops and fences. Dogs barked far off, but the streets close to her felt empty, deserted by courage. She moved toward the arroyo, every footstep testing her will. By the time she reached the ridge, sweat had cooled into a stubborn chill. The wagons came later than before, 2 instead of 3, pulled by restless mules. Cole walked ahead, lanterns swinging, muttering something to the driver. Behind them, the sheriff scanned the dark with the ease of a man who feared nothing. Emma crouched low, heart measuring every second. She could hear the creak of wheels, the groan of the earth under the weight of gold. One tarp slipped, revealing the edge of a sack stamped with the Miners' Guild seal. Her pulse quickened. This was the proof she needed, but proof, she learned, had a way of asking for payment. As she shifted to get a better view, her boot caught on a root. She didn't fall, but the sound, that dry crack, carried across the arroyo. Cole froze, lantern pausing mid-swing, then whipped his head toward her ridge. The sheriff raised his hand, signaling silence, eyes narrowing toward the sound. Emma pressed herself into the dirt, tasting metal in the air. The night seemed to hold its breath with her. Then a shot rang out, not at her, but into the air. Men shouted, scattering, thinking perhaps of bandits or rival claim jumpers. Emma used the confusion to slip backward, sliding down the ridge. Her knees scraped raw, but she didn't stop until fences rose ahead. In the distance, she saw a figure moving quickly toward town. It wasn't Cole, and it wasn't the sheriff. It was smaller, faster. Someone else was out here, chasing the same truth. Back in her room, she lit the lamp and spread the map again. She marked where she'd seen the wagons, then where the shot had been fired. The 2 points lined up near a dry gulch, a perfect hiding spot. But the other figure troubled her. Was it a friend or another thief? Emma stared at the map until the lines blurred, exhaustion winning over resolve. She didn't notice her father standing in the doorway, watching her silently. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Your mother would have done the same." The next morning, the sheriff posted notices about increased patrols for public safety. In truth, they were checkpoints, eyes and guns on every road out of Silver Creek. The town muttered about law and order, though no one dared challenge him openly. Emma walked past the bulletin board, not slowing, not showing interest. But inside, her resolve hardened. If she was to act, it had to be soon. The gold was moving. The sheriff was tightening his grip and eyes were turning her way. She could almost feel the desert itself whispering, now or never. Emma rose before the sun, the kind of darkness where shapes were still deciding what they were. She packed bread, water, and the rifle, tucking everything into a burlap sack. Her father stirred but said nothing, his silence heavy with both worry and approval. Outside, the air was sharp, the horizon painted in the first pale strokes of dawn. She headed toward the dry gulch she'd marked on her map, boots silent in the sand. Every step felt like trespassing into the sheriff's private ledger. She wasn't just walking, she was stealing back what had been taken. The gulch appeared as a split in the earth, a scar left by a forgotten river. Tracks littered its edge, wagon ruts, hoofprints, and the scuff of heavy boots. Emma crouched, running her fingers over the impressions, reading the story they told. The sheriff's men had been here recently, and not just passing through. Near the base of a mesquite, she found a scrap of burlap with the miner's seal. She pocketed it, proof she could carry without firing a shot. A coyote yipped somewhere beyond, the desert's reminder that she wasn't alone. From her vantage point on the ridge, she spotted 2 men loading crates into a shack. The building leaned like it was tired of standing, its roof sagging under the weight of dust. Cole barked orders, tossing a small chest inside and locking it with a heavy chain. Emma's breath slowed as she slid the rifle forward, using the sight to study their movements. She didn't pull the trigger. She wasn't here to kill, but to see. One of the men unrolled a ledger, the same kind Reverend Pike had handed over. Her stomach twisted at the thought of the preacher's ink on those pages. Suddenly, a noise behind her, the crunch of a boot on gravel. Emma whipped around, rifle raised, finger brushing the trigger. A boy, no older than 16, froze with his hands half lifted. His clothes were patched, his face gaunt, but his eyes burned with defiance. "You're not the only one watching," he whispered, glancing toward the shack. He introduced himself as Will, a miner's son whose father had vanished 2 weeks ago. The gold wasn't just wealth, it was ransom for the missing. Before she could question him further, voices rose from below. Cole had noticed the scrap of burlap missing from one of the sacks. He scanned the ridge with suspicion, the barrel of his rifle glinting in the sun. Emma and Will slid down the far side of the gulch, staying low among the rocks. The heat was rising, making every breath taste like copper and grit. They moved until the shack was a ghost in the distance, its danger still chasing them. Only when the wind swallowed the sound of the men's boots did they pause. Will told her about the night wagons, how they passed near his home toward Red Butte. He'd followed once, far enough to see they weren't headed for any bank. Instead, they vanished into the hills, toward an old mine sealed after a collapse. Emma's mind raced. The perfect hiding place, away from town eyes. But getting there meant crossing open land patrolled by the sheriff's men. One wrong move, and they'd both be bones under the sand. Still, Will's resolve matched hers. They shook on an unspoken pact. Back in Silver Creek, Emma avoided the main street, slipping through back alleys. She delivered the burlap scrap to Mr. Turner, who examined it in silence. When she told him about the shack and the ledger, his jaw set like stone. "You'll need more than proof," he warned. "You'll need the town on your side." Emma doubted anyone would stand openly against the sheriff. Not yet. But if they could find the missing miners, the tide might turn. Turner's parting gift was a small revolver, for when the rifle feels too far away. That night, Emma spread the map again, Will leaning over her shoulder. They traced the route from the arroyo to the sealed mine, marking watchposts. It would take timing, cover, and more luck than the desert usually offered. Still, she felt the first spark of something dangerous. Hope with a trigger. Will promised to gather what he could from the miners' families without drawing notice. Emma, for her part, would watch the shack and learn its patterns. By midnight, the plan felt as real as the dust under their nails. Outside, the wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of rain that wouldn't come. The desert was listening, and it remembered every secret it was told. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote's cry broke into 2 short barks. Then silence. Emma lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling beams, hearing every creak of the town. Tomorrow, she would step closer to the sheriff's throat, but tonight she let the quiet sharpen her resolve like a whetstone. And in the stillness, she swore she would not miss her chance. The morning sun bled over the rooftops of Silver Creek, throwing long shadows that stretched like warning fingers. Emma met Will behind the livery stable, the smell of hay and horses masking their whispers. He carried a battered satchel with a coil of rope, a dented canteen, and 2 lanterns. She had the rifle, the revolver Turner had given her, and a sack of cartridges wrapped in cloth. Today wasn't the day for the mine raid. It was the day to learn how to survive it. They'd head to the outskirts, where mesquite and sandstone could hide their movements. The desert, for all its dangers, was a better ally than the sheriff's streets. They walked for an hour until the town was a memory, the heat pressing on their backs. Will found a dried riverbed that twisted like a snake through the land. It made the perfect range. High walls to muffle sound, no one to see the dust kick. Emma set the rifle against her shoulder, feeling the stock's rough grain bite into her skin. The first shot cracked the air, the recoil jolting her bones and numbing her fingers. Will grinned despite the miss, pointing to the rock she'd shaved by an inch. "Better than my first try," he said, loading another round. By midday, she could hit a can from 20 paces, the rifle kicking less as her body learned. The revolver felt different, quicker, angrier, as if it had its own temper. Her aim was rough, but the sound gave her a kind of confidence that silence never had. Will taught her to move while reloading, to keep low, to use the land as cover. Every bruise on her shoulder, every sting in her palm, was a lesson paid in full. She began to understand that guns weren't about strength, but rhythm and resolve. The desert wind carried the sharp tang of gunpowder like a new kind of perfume. When the sun dipped low, painting the sky with copper and blood, they rested under a mesquite. Will spoke of his father, a quiet man who'd taught him how to set a snare, not shoot a gun. The sheriff's men had come for him in daylight, calling it questioning. He never came back. Emma listened without interrupting, her mind already threading his story into her own. Loss, she realized, was the currency everyone paid in Silver Creek. What you did afterward decided whether you went broke or came out rich in grit. She decided she wouldn't spend her grief quietly. Back in town, Emma visited Turner again, asking for one last thing, a holster. He hesitated, then handed her one worn smooth by another life. "It belonged to your mother," he said, voice tight. "She'd have wanted you to have it." Emma traced the leather, feeling the ghost of a woman she'd only known through stories. Her father had never spoken much about her, and now Emma understood why. This wasn't just a tool, it was a legacy stitched in every seam. She fastened it at her hip, the revolver sliding in like it belonged there. That night, she kept watch near the shack, crouched among sagebrush. The sheriff's men loaded fewer sacks, but the routine was the same: chain, ledger, lantern. Emma studied the timing, the way Cole favored his left leg, the gaps in their vigilance. She noted how one man always stepped away to relieve himself, leaving the lock unguarded. Her mind built the raid piece by piece, each floor a doorway she could walk through. Patience, she told herself, was the sharpest weapon she owned, and she intended to keep it honed until the moment it struck. The only break in the night's rhythm came with the sound of hooves in the distance. A lone rider approached, face hidden under a broad-brimmed hat. The sheriff greeted him with a handshake heavy with unspoken agreements. The stranger handed over a pouch, and the metallic clink inside spoke for itself. Emma strained to see his face, but caught only a glint of pale eyes before he turned away. Whoever he wasn't just passing through. He was part of the machine, and that meant the machine was bigger than she'd thought. When the men left, Emma slipped closer to the shack, her steps silent in the sand. She touched the lock, feeling its cold bite, memorizing its weight and shape. The burlap scent of the sacks inside leaked through the cracks, sweet and metallic. She didn't break in. Not tonight. She wanted the first move to be the last. Back at the store, she marked the stranger's arrival on her map. The pattern was forming: gold in, gold out, trust traded like stolen whiskey. The mine wasn't just a hiding place, it was a vault for more than coin. Emma lay awake in bed, the revolver on the table beside her. She imagined the sheriff's face when the town saw the truth laid bare. She imagined the sound of wagon wheels carrying gold back to the people. Her heart beat with the steady rhythm of a clock ticking down to something inevitable. Will's words about his father echoed in her ears like a quiet drumbeat. In the darkness, she whispered her promise again. She would not miss her chance. And when the time came, she'd be ready to pull the trigger. The day began with a sky the color of burnished steel, heavy with heat and intent. Emma and Will met before sunrise, the map between them, every line now etched into memory. They carried only what they could run with: rifles, revolvers, rope, and 2 lanterns. The plan was simple, but only in words: reach the shack, take the gold, vanish to the mine. From there, release the miners if they were alive, and bring both proof and people to town. Every risk had been measured, but the desert still had a way of adding its own surprises. Today they'd find out which ones were fatal. They approached through the arroyo, hidden by its high, jagged walls. The scent of mesquite smoke told them the sheriff's men were already working. Emma's heart kept time with her footsteps, steady, deliberate, unwilling to falter. From a gap in the rock, she saw Cole counting sacks under the stranger's watchful eyes. The chain on the shack's door was loose, the careless kind of mistake that came from greed. Will whispered the signal, and they split, him to the back, Emma to the lock. Her hands worked fast, the metal giving way with a groan too soft to carry. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the sharp tang of gold left too long in burlap. Crates stacked to the ceiling, sacks marked with the Miners' Guild seal. She filled her satchel until it was almost too heavy to lift. Then she saw it, a corner of canvas pulled back to reveal a man's boot. 3 miners sat bound and gagged, eyes wide with disbelief at her sudden appearance. Emma cut their ropes, whispering for silence, pointing them toward the arroyo. One mouthed "thank you" before vanishing into the shadows with Will's guidance. It might have ended clean if not for the wind slamming the shack door. Cole spun, rifle up, his face twisting from confusion to rage. Emma dove behind a crate as the first shot splintered the wall beside her. The stranger drew faster than she'd expected, sending another round through the doorway. Emma returned fire, her bullet grazing Cole's shoulder, forcing him back. The gold clinked with every move she made, a reminder of both prize and danger. She could hear boots pounding closer. The sheriff had joined the fight. He stepped into the doorway, calm in a way only men certain of their power could be. "Miss Carter," he said, voice slow as syrup, "you're about to write your own obituary." Emma kept her rifle steady, sight locked on his chest. "You stole from the people. You'll give it back," she answered, her voice sharp enough to cut. His laugh was low, without humor. The people wouldn't know what to do with it. Behind him, Will appeared with two of the freed miners, rifles raised. The balance in the room shifted, tilting the game away from the sheriff. The first shot came from the stranger, not the sheriff. It struck a lantern, spilling fire across the floor, the flames licking at burlap sacks. Gold and smoke didn't mix well. Panic spread faster than bullets. Emma fired once, catching the stranger in the leg, sending him sprawling. Will's shot clipped the sheriff's hat clean off, forcing him back into the sunlit doorway. Cole cursed and lunged, but one of the miners struck him with the butt of a rifle. The fight turned chaotic, the air thick with gunpowder and burning dust. Emma grabbed as many sacks as she could, tossing them to the miners. They ran for the arroyo, the fire behind them growing into a roaring wall. The sheriff stumbled after them, firing wildly, his badge catching the light like an accusation. Emma turned at the ridge, took a deep breath, and fired. The shot knocked his gun away. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes, raw and unmasked. "You're done," she told him, before disappearing into the desert with her people. The fire swallowed the shack, along with the last of his stolen secrets. By nightfall, the gold was back in Silver Creek, poured into the chapel for safekeeping. The freed miners spoke to the town, their voices cutting through years of fear. Names were named, lies uncoiled, and the sheriff's power bled out like water through sand. Emma stood at the back, holster at her hip, watching the crowd take ownership of their victory. Turner caught her eye, nodding once, a silent approval she didn't need but welcomed. Will grinned, handing her a coin from one of the sacks. "For luck," he said. She kept it, though she knew luck had little to do with any of it. When dawn broke the next day, Silver Creek felt different, lighter, but wary. The sheriff was gone, the stranger limping out of town before sunrise. Cole lay in the jail he'd once guarded, his future as small as his cell. Emma walked the street with a calm she hadn't felt in years, the rifle no longer a stranger's tool. Children played near the boardwalk without glancing over their shoulders. The gold would rebuild the town, but her fight had rebuilt something else, herself. And in Silver Creek, they no longer called her a maiden who didn't know how to use a gun. The desert has a way of remembering the footsteps of those who dare to change it. In the weeks that followed, Silver Creek began to stitch itself back together. The miners returned to their claims, children's laughter replaced the echo of boots on wood, and trade filled the air with the scent of flour and leather instead of fear. The chapel bell rang again, not as a warning, but as a promise. And through it all, Emma Carter walked the streets, not as the shopkeeper's quiet daughter, but as the woman who had brought justice to a town that had forgotten its shape. She kept the rifle, though she rarely carried it. A reminder that strength wasn't in the weapon, but in the will to use it when it mattered. The coin Will had given her stayed in her pocket, worn smooth by her thumb on long days. Turner still called her Maiden from time to time, though now it was with a smile and a nod of respect. Even her father spoke of her mother more often, as if Emma's stand had reopened something he'd kept locked away. One morning, she stood on the porch of the store, watching the sun rise over the arroyo. Silver Creek was quiet, almost peaceful, and Emma knew that if trouble ever came again, the town would meet it differently, because now, they all knew, maidens could use guns.